Okay. Books, all kinds, paintings. There's a nice painting right there. Okay, we're going to have a little chat with somebody here, and could be sad, could be good. I don't know where it's going to go. I know there won't be no swearing in this one. That's guaranteed. So we'll have a look here. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Charles.
What was your name?
Terry Atkinson,
And you are?
Senior Pastor at Brunswick Street Baptist Church.
How time flies, huh?
For the last 14 years.
Is it 14?
14 years, Charles.
Whoever is going to listen to this video, maybe one of our audience of 3 people, me, myself, and I, who knows, by the time this video is posted, you're gone, you're not in Fredericton, you're in Brampton, Ontario, somewhere, trying to adjust to the new humans attitude in Ontario. Hope you meet no bloggers in there. And, we're just going to have a chat. Where are you born?
Outside of Moncton.
Are you outside of Moncton?
Yeah, well, actually I was born in Moncton at the old Moncton Hospital.
Me too.
So I lived on the Salisbury Road, grew up there. My dad worked for CNR, my mom was a nurse. So I'm a rural boy from outside of Moncton.
Right close to me. Remember Cook?
You remember Cook?
Yeah.
Yep.
My God. Close.
Mm-hmm.
So, so you went and you decided to go to university?
Yeah, after high school.
Where's your wife from?
My wife's from Salisbury.
So, okay, so Moncton born. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So I went to school in Salisbury, graduated from high school there, went on to a place called Atlantic Baptist College at that time. It's now Crandall University. I took my first 2 years of a general arts degree, then transferred up here to Fredericton of all places, and went to St. Thomas University, graduated with my BA, majored in psych and minored in soc, and sensed my aunt was a social worker, and I sensed the desire to go into that profession. So I went looking for a job in social work, and this is back in the 70s, and in those days you really needed a Bachelor of Social Work in order to get into social work. But I decided to go on for my master's at Dalhousie, but I couldn't get in there because I didn't have any experience in social work. So I wound up getting one of those summer jobs in Moncton with the Department of Social Services back in the 70s. My summer job turned out to be a 10-year job with the department. So I got into social work and was a social worker, did child protection, eventually went on and got my Bachelor of Social Work while I was working, got that from Dalhousie, so I worked part-time or worked full-time and studied part-time. And then after child protection, I ended up actually becoming the program consultant for child protection in the province, and so we actually moved back here to Fredericton. So we lived here in Fredericton, New Maryland, for a couple of years, and it was during that time when I really had a sense that God was calling me to full-time Christian ministry.
Are you trying to tell me God is in New Maryland?
Actually, it was in Bathurst, Charles.
Bathurst.
Where I
just came from there last weekend.
Where I sensed the call to ministry.
Why is that? How did that happen?
I was at Danny's Motel. Do you remember there?
You mean Danny's Takeout where they eat? Or what's it called?
It used to be, well, it was Danny's Motel at
What
that
is it
time.
called? Danny? Is it Danny's the Takeout? The Danny Burger?
Oh, I don't know. Could
Remember?
be. It's been years
Takeout,
now.
like A&W Takeout. Sorry, just got some flashback here. So you were at Danny's Motel?
So I was at Danny's Motel, and I was the consultant for the province, and these couple
Consultant for what?
for Department of Social Services,
Okay.
for child protection.
Got it.
And a couple social workers were doing a presentation, and I was there as the consultant just to talk to social workers about difficult cases and so on and so forth. And it was at that meeting when I really had a sense that God was calling me to the ministry. And I know it sounds kind of peculiar, Charles, but it was one of those, what I say, God moments that I sense God saying to me in my head. That's all I can explain it as.
No hard liquor, no
hard
marijuana,
liquor.
no nothing. Just pure, straight.
I was pure, straight.
You weren't in jail, in batters, like they see God behind bars.
Not at all.
Right in the hallway at Danny's Motel in Batters.
Exactly.
So what did you hear? What did you see?
God was saying, what are you doing here, Terry? Where I want you is in full-time Christian ministry. And to tell you the truth, Charles, I was a jogger at the time, so I went back to my hotel room that night And I got my jogging clothes on, and I went for a long, long jog.
Like Trudeau, was it in the storm? Was January, February? What was it?
I think it was in the spring. I can't
Spring.
even remember.
Okay,
the month,
God
but-
just shows up in the spring. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I went for this long jog and had a great talk with God, saying, Lord, what are you doing? We had just had our second child, so we have 2 little children. I'm living in New Maryland as the consultant for the province. I'm got a good government job.
Making money.
We've got a good home. Everything's going
Okay,
well.
so you get home, you tell the wife. This should be very good.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. I did not tell my wife for 3 months.
Okay. So what did you do?
And the reason is, Charles, I didn't tell her for 3 months because when I had proposed to her 10 years prior to that, at that time I was at St. Thomas and I wasn't sure what I was going to do for a career. And I remember distinctly Brenda saying to me, I don't care what you do, I love you, I want to be with you. There's just one thing I could never stand, and that's being a pastor's wife. So, Charles, I remembered those words very clearly.
What year were you? What age were you? What year was this? You seen God?
That would have been, let me see, it would have been 19... We were married in 72, so about 1982,
1982.
around that time frame.
So you were how old? You remember?
So I would have been around 30.
30.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
then we got the news.
So I remembered Brenda saying those words, and
Yeah.
so for 3 months I
hit it.
wrestled with God, and I said, God, what are you doing? Because I'm not going into the ministry unless I have the support of my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So for 3 months I kept it to myself. I prayed about it. I struggled with God.
And then you see
Finally,
you see the burning bush.
Then I finally got the nerve up to talk to Brenda. And so one night I remember sharing with her, Brenda, I had this encounter with God at Danny's Motel 3 months ago when I sensed God calling me to the ministry.
And the divorce papers were served.
And you know what her words were, Charles?
Go ahead.
Are you ready for this?
What's that?
She looked at me and she said, it's about time.
Oh, really?
She said, I sensed God calling us to ministry a year before that, but I knew he would never call, we'd never end up into it until he called you. So she felt called before I did. That to me, Charles, was a confirmation from God that this is where we were headed. Now, she was very honest. She said, I'm not looking forward to it. I know being a pastor's wife has lots of demands.
Lots of phone calls.
You live in the fishbowl. It's not going to be an easy life. But she said, if that's where God wants us, that's where we need to go.
So,
So I resigned my job from the government.
resign your job.
I did.
How long you worked there?
Well, I had been a social worker for 10 years.
So good pension.
I'd been in Fredericton for almost 2 years.
Nice house in New
Nice
Maryland.
house.
2 kids.
Yeah, 2 kids.
So you
We
worked
packed
your
up
way.
and left it all behind and went back to school.
Where did you go?
Went to Acadia Divinity College down in Wolfville, Nova Scotia to get my master's, and spent 3 years literally in poverty. We lived on $7,000 a year with 2 children.
There must have been some domestic dispute and say, come on, this is not working out here. We got 2 kids crying. They want to go into sports. They want to do this, but there must have been.
There was times when it was hard, yes, very difficult. But we were both committed Christians, and we believed this is where God wanted us, that he would provide for us. And he did. I have to say, Charles, looking back, those 3 years, there were tough times for sure. But God never let us down. He never provided our greed, but he provided our need. And there were times, I have to tell you a story, I can tell you story after story, how God would provide, we'd open the mail, and there would be a check in the mail from a friend of ours for $50, and we'd go and buy groceries. I mean, God provided for us throughout those years in a marvelous way.
You got your degree.
I got my degree. Went
You
off.
seen God. Okay, do you put your finger in your mouth and say, okay, God, which direction is the wind?
Where do I go now? So after graduation, we got a call to a church on Prince Edward Island.
Lady Prince Edward.
So we were on Prince Edward Island for almost 4 years, serving at 2 little churches there.
Where's that?
Central Bedeck and Belmont were the
Okay.
2 churches there. We were there for 4 years, and then we sensed, again, God calling, and he called us to Newcastle, and we went to the Miramichi.
Machine.
We had 8 great years there and saw the church
What year was
grow.
that?
We were there from 1990 to 1998.
Oh my God.
You were up there then?
You were there when Alan Leger and everything.
We arrived there just after they had found Alan Leger.
Right after.
Yeah. People were still very nervous because of all the things that were going on there, but it was a very traumatized city, there's no doubt about it, with what all they went through with Alan Leger, yeah. Yep.
And what happened to the priests?
That was very difficult, so they went through a pretty rough time during those years.
I was there 2 weekends ago. It's nice there.
It's beautiful. So we spent 8 years there and then had a call to New Minas down in Nova Scotia. And we left Newcastle and went down to New Minas to a hurting church, and we saw some real healing take place there. We were only there about 4 years, and then we had this call to Brunswick Street.
How the kids take that? Your kids? By then you got 4?
No, just 2 children.
Still 2? Okay.
Just 2, yeah.
So how those kids handle it, your teenage
Moving
years
around
and
and
moving
all that
around,
stuff.
new friends, and you adjust. Boy, was it 2 girls or 2?
Boy and a girl.
And they got boyfriend or girlfriend, and then suddenly boom, boom. How did they take all this?
Oh, it's difficult. That's not an easy thing for children to cope with, but both of them, they typical teenagers. They went through some struggle years, but I have to honestly say, Charles, that both of them I think have turned out remarkably well.
One of them got 4 kids, right? Or you got 4 together?
Our daughter has 4 little girls, and she's married to a Christian camp director who is running a camp out in Caroline in Alberta. And my son is a professor at Wilfrid Laurier, and interesting enough, his wife is a social worker. And they have 2 little children, and they're living in Ontario. So both my kids have turned out well, and
you feel safe to say that
families.
You were blessed.
Oh, Charles, more than blessed. God has shone His light down upon us in so many ways. Have we had struggles? Sure, like anybody. My wife has had 2 bouts of cancer. We've had issues in our lives that have been certainly difficult to deal with. But through it all, God has provided and cared for us in a marvelous way. So yes, we are blessed.
So then we get to the juicy part. I won't even swear. I won't even use the H word. So how did you end up in Fredericton?
So the committee came after us when we were in New Minas and asked us to consider coming here as the senior pastor.
From you're in Nova Scotia then?
We were in Nova Scotia, yeah. And so in the Baptist world, search committees go and look for a new pastor, and they were looking for a senior pastor here at Brunswick Street. They had been without a pastor for over 2 years. So they got...
Did they offer you a house or stuff like that? Or?
Well, you start the process simply by meeting with the committee to find out if it's got a potential to be a good fit. Is it a good fit for us? Is it a good fit for them? So you go through that process to determine God's will in that whole matter.
What did you thought when you first met the committee? As I said, this video is not shown when you're in Ontario preaching. But what did you first... there's a different attitude.
Yeah, we were very surprised, to be very honest, that we would get a call to Brunswick Street, because what we knew of Brunswick Street, we didn't know a lot, but we knew it was an old downtown church, pretty well established as far as strong within our convention, but being a downtown church, we certainly got a sense that it was more stayed in the past and more traditional, and I wasn't sure if I would fit into that mold, because as I said to the committee, I'm not a maintenance minister. I'm a minister that likes to see things change, and not just change for the sake of change, but to really see God's kingdom expanded and to look at doing things in new ways. I've always preached that the message will never change. The message is the same, that Jesus Christ, I believe, is our hope, but the methods of communicating that have to change, because our world is changing, and so we need to look at different ways of doing it. So the committee really liked the idea that I was willing to come and bring some new changes here.
Did they really knew what kind of changes that was coming?
I don't think a committee ever fully understands what they're getting into, nor did we fully understand what we were getting into.
Especially when you get a Walker bum walking through the doors. We have to call the police. But that changed, right?
Yep.
And the change, was it difficult? What did you do? Okay, you first landed here. You had to deal the attitude that everybody is equal. We're not talking about black, Indians, French. We're not talking about that. We're talking about human beings. Everybody, poor, rich. How did you manage that?
Well, I think, one of the things I challenged the committee on very early and the church on was that I observed that this was a downtown church geographically, but my question to them, are you a downtown church missionally? In other words, are you reaching out to the downtown core? So we began to look at the various ministries that were going on here, and there's been always, this church has always had a solid track record in the kind of ministries they've done for years and years and years. But we began to look at some of them, saying, okay, how can we improve in some areas? What are some areas that we need to look at new and different ways of doing it? Worship was one of the big ones that we had addressed very early on, and that was we felt there needed to be a choice for people. A traditional service and a contemporary service to allow the young people to express their worship in a way that was more appealing to them.
Are we talking about the gym?
Yeah. So we introduced the
one that I found out there was a 10 minutes delay and I had to listen to the sermon twice.
Exactly, Charles. Exactly. Yeah. So we introduced simultaneous services, and we were one of the first churches in the Maritimes to do this. And I was excited about that. And when we introduced it, people wondered if it would work. But here we are many years later, and it's still going strong. And I think to be able to offer two services at the same time is quite amazing. And it's allowed our church to grow. And then we addressed the whole need of young families, and bringing Pastor Nancy on as our first full-time children's pastor.
What a sweetheart she is, huh?
Well, that was a big step because she was a female, and that's not always accepted well in churches. But she was ordained here in this church, and she's done a wonderful job of improving our ministry to children and young families. And then the next big thing was certainly our outreach ministry for the downtown core, and that really happened with the death of Harry Haven in the shelter. That's really how that got started.
Oh, really?
Do you remember Harry?
That was a guy with the red hair.
Harry was he passed away in the shelter
on the couch.
On the couch.
Drugs overdose, wasn't it?
And Brian Duplessis was brand new. He was the new director of the shelter. And he sensed there was a need for some closure, and so he called Mavis Doucette, and Mavis called Nancy and said, do you think Brunswick Street would be open to having a memorial service for Harry?
Yes.
And Nancy came to me, and I jumped at it. And I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. So we held a little memorial service for Harry.
I think I was here.
And that was a wonderful turning point, Charles, that allowed us to say, okay, what else can we do to become a downtown ministry? How can we reach out to our downtown friends? Then when the Isaac Way fire happened, and you won't forget that one, right? And again, Nancy and Kelly were pivotal in getting that going as far as the way the churches reached out and
I think it's
clothing.
for you it was the perfect storm for a nice sermon.
Absolutely.
To say, well, you snobbish people, while you enjoy your nice turkey for Thanksgiving, think about the big fire last night.
And you know what people did that day, Charles? When Pastor Nancy got up and announced that we were going to take up a little collection and get some clothing and talked about the fire, people got up during my sermon and went home to get their turkeys that were cooking in their oven and bring it back here so we could serve a full turkey dinner that night.
Stop it, Terry. I don't want to have no tears in my eyes. I'm Scottish.
Come on, Charles.
I've
gotten you crying a couple times. You know that.
Yeah, you did. And I'm Scottish. I'm not supposed to show no emotion whatsoever. No, that was. It
was a wonderful turning point.
It was.
And so I think since then this church has become a church very much involved in the community, very much reaching out to anyone. Doesn't matter their economic status, doesn't matter their background. We just simply want to show God's love to people.
We know where we were when the Pope was shot at. Robert Kennedy, not John F. Robert Kennedy was shot. John Lennon and all that. We know where we were.
Yep.
Do you remember the first time I walked through these doors? Am I that important? Well, I'm not.
I don't remember the first time, Charles, but I know certainly, watching the news and seeing you in the paper and that type of thing, I knew all about you in that sense. And Nancy knew you better than I. And so, she was the one that really kind of said, we need to see if we can get Charles to come to one of our suppers or have Charles in. And so she began to build a little bit of relationship with you. Next thing I knew, you and I became connected.
I remember I was up. I always loved to go upstairs, and you came. Hello, and I went, okay, it's Charles. What is Charles doing here? Gotta be. Okay, let's find out. And I love the choir. Beautiful work.
Yep.
Somebody asked me, excuse me, ain't you a Catholic? Oh yeah, I'm a Catholic. I'm a good one too. But I love the Baptist Church. I remember when I rode my bicycle in the 70s across the States, and I went to a Baptist church in the 70s in Florida, and they were talking about today's event, like the hostages that was held in Iran. And they talk about, what's going on in today's world. And the Catholic, I was just, I don't know if my ADHD then, that didn't click in. But the Baptists, and sometime I will admit they go overboard in violating the cops. We'll get to that later. But I'm always excused to go on. But it's a good church.
Well, thanks, Charles. I believe it is good church too. And like I say, it's been a real blessing for me to be senior pastor here for 14 years. We've seen tremendous change. We added that new wing. That was a huge project, and to be able to to deal with the city and the province with York House, I mean, that took us a whole year to negotiate that. But that in itself is a story, because God taught us patience and love and acceptance of people, even when we didn't always agree.
Speaking of patience and love, do you remember the time when ADHD style I had to leave? I always leave first. Because so you go at the door, you shake hands to everybody, which I don't shake your hand because I do that to a politician also. I don't want to catch any germs.
Yep.
But when I went out and you asked me, Charles, I hope you're not mad at me. And I told you it was a good sermon. No, you came right after me, Charles. I got a new job. I hope you're not mad. I said, what? Are you the new chief of police? No, I'm the new chaplain.
Yes.
So how did that turn out? Be chaplain of the Fredericton Police Force. What did you learn?
Well, that's been a great experience for me too, Charles. And again, I didn't see that coming, but
me neither. Trust me, me neither.
But that really,
God works in mysterious ways.
He does.
Yeah.
He really does. But that really came about through Duncan Lombard, because when I dealt with Christian Garuso, who was murdered here in the city.
Was that? Which one was that?
He was stabbed to death, and
What year was that?
his mother was from Colombia. And
Yes.
Edith Salas, and we were involved with that family. I had that funeral.
Okay.
And so that was a very, very difficult time for that family. And we walked alongside that family during that time.
That's the guy that was released there, just released, sent back to Colombia. Okay. Got it.
And so basically, we actually went out to the airport because Edith was working at the time out in Edmonton. And when she found out her son was stabbed, they flew her home, and the police were contacted, and Duncan went out to the airport to meet her. So we went out too, and so we met Edith, and that's when I first encountered Duncan. And of course, he walked with us through that whole time of the funeral and the investigation about Christian Garuso's death. And anyway, as a result of that, after that incident was all over, I decided to go down to the police station to personally thank the chief for providing Duncan to the family, because I thought Duncan did such a marvelous job with the family, because he spoke a little Spanish and so was able to communicate well with the family. And so I just wanted to personally pass on those, because a lot of times we take people for granted, be it the police or anyone else, Charles. We don't often say thank you. And I think we need to learn to encourage and thank people. So I wanted to go down, and so I met with the chief. I made an appointment, went down and chatted with her and told her how much I appreciated that, and I thought that would be the end of it. And lo and behold, a few months later, I get this call, and she asked, their previous chaplain had retired, and she said, I was wondering if you would be interested in coming on as our new chaplain.
Now, how does good deal with evil?
And what do you mean, Charles?
Cops, evil. You, good.
I'm not good.
You're not good?
No.
Am I good?
God is good.
God, okay.
Okay.
I apologize. How does God deal with evil?
God loves people, and He's taught me to love people. And sin is in our world, and we all make mistakes, and we're not perfect, and we need forgiveness.
Yes.
All of us. And to be in a right relationship with God, we need to work at that, and we need to seek that forgiveness, and we need to accept people where they're at and love them and try to show them the right way.
Okay, what did you show the right way to the police?
So what I tried to do over the last, I've only been in that chaplaincy position for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, and like I said, I've really enjoyed it. It's been a learning curve for me.
What did you learn?
I've gone out on ride-alongs. I trying to understand firsthand what some of the stress that they're under, some of the things they have to deal with.
Especially people with mental illness. There's a lot of mental issues out there.
In the community?
In the community
For sure.
that the police has to deal with.
Absolutely.
Let's get one thing straight here. I was one of their biggest supporters.
Mm-hmm.
Before they came after me, then I'm Scottish, and I'm like the little Donald Trump. If you come after me, I'm going to fight back. And I have a police scanner, and they go through a lot.
They do.
There's a lot of domestic. They're not cops. They're social workers.
Very much so. And that was one of the reasons why the chief felt that I would be a good chaplain, and I've been called out a couple times in the middle of the night, deal with suicide, domestic violence, whatever. Because of my social work background, she felt it was a good fit. And I believe it has been, because you're right, the cops have to deal with some pretty tough situations. And do they do it right all the time? No. Do I do it right all the time? No. There's times I have messed up too, Charles. And, you know, as long as your goal and your values are in place and you're trying to do your best, then I think that's where we need to be moving in. But to recognize that they're going to make mistakes, I'm going to make mistakes.
Do you think that maybe the police should use Duncan style and go in the community and hold town meetings or meetings and talk with the public?
I mean, communication obviously is a key, and building relationships in the community is a key, and I think that's an ongoing problem, and I think some of the officers are put in positions where they can do that better than others. Duncan is obviously in a role where he is a community liaison officer, and so he works in the community a lot, but he also has gifts in those areas. Not all the officers have those same gifts.
No.
Same with pastors. I was asked once to plant a church. That's not my gift, Charles. My gift is to go in and into an established church and help it grow. So we need to find the right gifts and fit them in the right place.
Same as bloggers.
Exactly.
There's bad bloggers like me, and there's good ones. You know, we got to adjust.
But Charles, you've done some good things in the past, and that's, if there's anything that we've tried to help you understand, is you need to focus on the good things that you've done and not perseverate on the things that can kind of upset you all the time. And so if you would focus on those good things, I think you do some great things, Charles. You have in the past.
I have the prayer on my wall. Notre Père qui es aux cieux, que ton nom soit sanctifié, que ton règne vienne, que ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Pardonne-nous nos offenses comme nous pardonnons aussi à ceux qui nous ont offensés. That's in English says forgive
those who trespass against us.
Every time I say that, when I finish that, I always say, little word, j'ai un problème avec celle-là. That means I have a problem with that one.
Yes.
I like to go to the police and say,
Yeah.
I forgive you. Wear a white robe, and then say, I love everybody. Then you walk by somebody and you say, I love you. My God, you will call the police so fast and put you in a mental ward. I mean, it's funny how the system works.
Yeah.
But I would love to forgive. Because I don't want to have so much anger. Look, I'm shaking my camera just thinking about it. But it's so easily, it's not easily done to forgive.
But the problem, Charles, as long as you hang on to the anger, it's like the person who wants to throw a hot coal at someone who they're angry at. You know what happens?
Why?
If I pick up a hot coal from a fire to throw it at you, what's going to happen?
You're going to get burnt.
I'm going to get burnt. So when we hang on to anger, all we're doing is hurting ourselves. And the more we hold on to that anger, it
shows.
It destroys us.
And
it eats away at us.
Yeah.
We're bitter. We're angry. We're not in a good relationship with God. And that's why. Is it easy? No. I have been hurt over the years, Charles. There's been people who have hurt me. And if I hang on to that and perseverate on it and think about it all the time, it can really do some damage to me.
It's like you said once, and it was very well said. You said a lot of sermons, I really love you. I don't use that word too often, but I really love you for the way you do your sermons. And one you said, if you show anger, if you got anger inside, that's what people's going to look at you as an angry person.
Sure.
And the last couple of years, yes, I will admit that there's been a lot of anger, and I am angry. Mm-hmm. And I wish I could, it's hard. Never mind me. But what do you see this church in 50 years from now, beside having a new staple? The staple can be gone?
It has to come down. The steeple has to come down this summer because it's unsafe. It's got some some dry rot, so the plan is to bring it down this summer.
It'll be just like the Walmart church.
And then the question will be, they'll put a temporary cap on it, and then they'll have to make that huge decision to say, are we going to put a new steeple up, or are we going to go with no steeple? That's a decision the congregation will have to make in the next 6 to 8 months.
Now, you always, between two groups, you need somebody, the liaison, to do the good public relations skill. You're going to be gone. You're going to be in Ontario. Mm-hmm. Do you think it will still be the same to have people walk in here, people with mental issues and poverty? And
I would hope so, Charles. I think the DNA has been set in this church, and I think the congregation has really embraced the idea of being a downtown church missionally. I think the fact that we've brought in a refugee family, we're going to vote on another one this coming Thursday, I think it speaks well to this church of the desire for them to reach out in Christ's love to all people. And so my prayer is, as I leave this church, is that it would continue on in that vein. Will there be changes? For sure. Anytime a senior pastor leaves, there'll be some new direction. There'll have to be a new senior pastor discovered at some point, and there'll be changes in staff, I expect. So will it move in a different direction? I expect there will be some changes, but I would hope and pray that this church will continue. And I think it has been solid that way, is that the message of the love of Jesus Christ has always gone out from here.
I hope the video don't stop, but I'll ask you, I bet you asked you from the beginning. You're leaving. There's no scandal, no nothing. What, did you just put your finger up in the air and the direction going toward Ontario?
No, we prayed and wrestled with it for some time, and in February I was down in Nova Scotia at some meetings and really going through some difficult times in prayer with Brenda and I and God, and just a real sense, Charles, it was time for new leadership. And sometimes senior pastors can get to a point where they say, maybe it's time for someone else to take the reins. And so we prayed about it and just felt this was the time. So I resigned on February 14th with no place to go. My son in Ontario was quite alarmed that I would do that with no place to go, but I said, Andrew, God has provided in the past, He will provide something in the future. So we began to just look around, and my son was looking for churches in Ontario, and my daughter was looking for churches in Alberta. And then, lo and behold, this church in Brampton came available, and I put my name in the hat, and they contacted us, and the rest is history.
Well, is their gain is our loss.
Well, thank you, Charles.
Listen.
It's been a privilege, brother.
Listen, thank you very much for all the patience you had, especially with me, and all the good chat, and you're a very good person to listen to, and I wish you the very, very, very best of luck.
And please, Charles, try to work on that, asking God to help you deal with that forgiveness, and keep your eyes on the Lord, will you?
I will. Might even ask you for a cross I could put on my wall as a souvenir. And every time I look at it, I'll think about you. Patience.
I will give you something before we leave.
Thank you.
God bless.